Alright, so I did a preview for this fight, and now it's time for the review of the fight between Angel Acosta and Juan Alejo for the vacant WBO World Light Flyweight title. Originally, this was going to be for the interim version of the WBO Light Flyweight title, this is 108 pounds, but just a day before the fight actually took place on the undercard of Miguel Cotto versus Saddam Ali, being that Angel Acosta is a Miguel Cotto. I believe he's either managed or promoted by Cotto at the moment. Uh, it was on that card, and a day before that this fight actually took place, the reigning champion Kosei Tanaka announced that he was officially vacating the title and planned on moving up to flyweight, the full flyweight 112-pound limit. Being that he himself has had some issues in the past, in the recent past, he hasn't been around very long. He's only had 10 fights, making 108 pounds now, even though he had started his career off with chasing after a title at 105. Got a 105-pound title, got a 108-pound title. He said very early on in his career that he was planning on trying to win 5 titles in 5 different weight classes, and apparently he's looking to make good on that promise. Trying to chase history, trying to make history. So let's see if he does it. But him vacating the title made way for two top contenders in Acosta and Alejo. Acosta being a former challenger of Tanaka. He actually fought him just 2 fights ago. 2 fights ago on Tanaka's record and 1 fight ago for Acosta. Whereas Juan Alejo had previously fought against Dani Nietes, the former WBO kingpin at 108 pounds. So, I mean, the WBO title at 108 has a fair bit of good history, especially recently, with Kosei Tanaka, probably the most explosive fighter to emerge at the lower weight classes in recent years, as well as Dani Nietes, who's been, one of the more dominant fighters for pretty much a decade now. He's right up there with Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez and Kazuto Ioka as a guy that's been kind of a long-standing, title holder, like a long-standing, just kind of a big name at the lower weight classes. So he's one of those guys that you can't take lightly with regards to some of the guys that may have come across him and lost to him, or otherwise whoever eventually potentially happens to dethrone him or kind of defeat him and usurp his overall stardom. But as for Acosta and Alejo, this was a good fight. When was a little bit less competitive than I expected. It seemed like Acosta has learned quite a bit from the fight with Tanaka. He kind of kept his cool in this fight. He's been a guy that's been very kind of like power heavy, kind of a bit of a headhunter in the past. I mean, if all you gotta do is look at his record to see that, he's 17-1 now, 17-1 with 17 knockouts. Here against Alejo, he was a little bit more moderate, a little bit more temperate with his offense. In the past, he was a lot more like willing to just like let everything fly. Even against Tanaka though, he did play a little bit closer to the chest early on. And try to box a bit with Tanaka. It was just a matter of Tanaka's superior hand speed and foot speed was able to kind of keep Tanaka just a step ahead of Acosta. He was able to kind of consistently beat him to the punch, but Acosta had several moments in that fight where he showed quite a bit of class, and it was just a matter of, I think, the fact that he took such a big step up in class, and the fact that he really doesn't have a lot of experience going rounds. That Tanaka fight was the first time he had ever gone past the 10th. It's the first time he had ever not only gone the full 12 rounds, but a full 10 rounds. Before that, everything else had been pretty much early knockouts. But here against Alejo, he had a gritty, durable opponent. Alejo had gone the full distance against Dani Nietes, cut Nietes, shook Nietes up on a couple of different occasions. A guy with a really pretty good body work. Although here against Acosta, he wasn't necessarily able to make that body work for him consistently. He wasn't able to consistently kind of cut the distance, be able to get to Acosta's body. Although, when I talk about cutting the distance, the two of them were roughly about the same height. Acosta looked like he was just a shade, like a hair taller than Alejo. He's listed at 5'4". I think he's a little bit closer to 5'5". Alejo looked like every bit of 5'4". But it was just a matter of, Alejo is the less rangy of the two. You could tell that Acosta has like the slightly longer arms, a slightly longer reach, and so it was kind of behooving him to kind of fight Alejo more so at mid-range and long distance, whereas Alejo with kind of the shorter, choppier shots would have been better off on the inside. And there were occasions where he was able to cut off the ring, but even then, Acosta showed great ability in order to fight on the inside as well. Acosta is looking like a fighter that's pretty well versed in being able to fight in a multitude of styles. He's pretty good on the inside, pretty good on the outside. I saw a little bit of extra head movement from him here against Alejo, which is something you can't necessarily take for granted in a big power puncher. A lot of the times they'll tend to neglect some of those subtler skills because of the fact that they believe in their power so much. But I think him losing to Tanaka was a good learning experience for him, as it turns out. And honestly, the way that he was able to kind of take care of Alejo, kind of just accumulate damage on Alejo and eventually stop him in the 10th round in this fight, shows, I mean, that he's kind of taken things to another level, because the only other guy to defeat Alejo this impressively, or not even this impressively, recently was Dani Nietes, the aforementioned Dani Nietes, who, as I mentioned before, is one of the main kind of touchstones of recent years of the light flyweight division, and the minimum weight division, and even now the flyweight division. Just the lower weights as a whole, the flyweight divisions as a construct of a weight range. Like not unlike say like Terrence Crawford has been is becoming now kind of a touchstone of the 135 to 147 weight range, as it were, or Mikey Garcia of like the 126 to 135 weight range, as it were. But really good win for Acosta. Kind of tough break for Alejo. It turns out it's looking like Alejo, at the age of 33 now, might not ever be able to get over that hump of becoming a world champion. Good solid fighter, but a guy that just doesn't quite have it at the top level as of yet, at the very least. Who knows? Maybe things will change for him in the future. There have been several guys that have been able to. I think that it's kind of a funny thing. A lot of people they think about lighter weight fighters, and they think that. This is a bit of a tangent here, but they think like, they're pretty much done by the 30s, and that's just the way it is. It's just because they can't age beyond a certain age. Really, I think it's a lot more to do with the fact that a lot of these guys turn pro very young. They get thrown into the grinder very early, very fast, and they burn out quickly. It's not unlike the old school days of boxing at the higher weights, where guys, they would be consistently fighting best versus best, and so that's a big part of the reason why they would usually be burnt out by their early 30s or mid 30s. But there have been several exceptions, especially more recently at the lighter weights, where guys have been able to keep up their winning ways at an elite level up into their late 30s and even early 40s. If you look at Muhammad Rahman, Luis Lazarte, Omar Narvaez, even still plugging away out there. I think he's 42 now. There are definitely exceptions to the rule. Even Dani Nietes himself, he's 35 years old, going on 36 pretty soon. Even though at flyweight he doesn't look quite as effective as he had been at the lower weights. I think he's a little bit small for 112. He's still doing it at the highest level, basically. So it remains to be seen what happens for him. As for Acosta, I think Acosta, being that 108 pounds is such a deep division, I think the 108 pound division is the deepest in terms of evenly matched fighters at the highest level of the game, and guys with a multitude of different styles that I think match up really, really nicely against each other. I think Acosta fits into that picture really nicely. I think with each fight he's improving. He's just pretty much coming into his own now. And even though he lost against Kosei Tanaka, it was a relatively close loss, and it was one that I think was a lot more of a learning experience for Acosta. And who knows, maybe Acosta will be able to rematch Tanaka at some point. If Tanaka doesn't keep growing up out of divisions, that might be the main thing that prevents it from potentially happening. Because Acosta, at his age, 27, I doubt he'd be moving up very many weight classes. Maybe one more up to 112, but beyond that, I couldn't necessarily see it. But just a fantastic win for Acosta. We got a new champion, a new name to be talking about at 108. And even though Kosei Tanaka has now moved out of the division, Acosta stands as another name, to be kind of thrown in there, ballied about in top level matchups. You got Ryoichi Taguchi versus Milan Melindo taking on, they fighting on New Year's Eve, and that fight now is not only for the WBA and the IBF titles, but it's also going to be for the Ring Magazine lineal title. They're now number 1 and number 2. Before they were number 2 and number 3, and Costa Tanaka was the number 1, and since Tanaka has moved up out of the division, it's number 1 versus number 2 now. Then you also have Kenshiro, WBC champion. You got Pedro Guevara, Galinha Lopez, Carlos Canizales, Hickey Butler. You got so many great, or at the very least, very, very good, very skilled fighters at this weight class. And I just can't wait to see them all fight against each other. If there was the possibility out there for it to have like a World Boxing Super Series at light flyweight, even though it's not necessarily a premier division, I mean, same way that cruiserweight isn't necessarily one. I think that we'd be in for a hell of a series of fights. But I mean, even without that, these guys tend to fight each other a lot more often, and especially with regards to the unification taking place between Taguchi and Melindo, I think that further unifications are a lot more likely to happen because the likes of Butler, the likes of Shiro, Guevara, Garinga Lopez are the type of guys that have been very vocal in the past about wanting to get titles, unify titles, prove that they're the man, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and really try to kind of go above and beyond just being a mere title holder in their division and trying to kind of make history, not unlike the way that Ivan Calderon, Rosendo Alvarez, Ricardo Lopez, Michael Carbajal, those guys made history at the lowest weight classes. So that's going to do it for this one. Much props to Angel Acosta. I'm going to be really looking forward to seeing how like this kind of mini Tito Trinidad goes about with his career. And interestingly enough, his ring alias is Tito, so he definitely styles himself after the great Puerto Rican power puncher. So let's see if he's able to truly live up to that name. So that's gonna do it for this one, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Oh yeah, by the way, video link for the full fight of the video in the description. Check it out. All right, peace.